I think after some times I came back to this class. As per the, I think the last few classes have been taken by Mr. Gamanayaka, and he would have covered some topic. And today I'm going to cover corporate governance section. As I mentioned in my first class, I will cover. I was given some topics to cover this finance institution management. Accordingly, I have already covered financial reporting and analysis, audit, compliance, and risk management. So one more topics I need to cover today, and to this next class, that is the corporate governance. This corporate governance also one of the important topic for the exam, because it covers, or normally generally we can expect 20 marks question from the corporate governance. So if you have learned the corporate governance properly, you have the chance to get maximum of 20 marks, or based on your answering pattern, you can get some marks or good marks in the corporate governance questions. So having that that introduction, I like to move into the today's topic, the corporate governance. Before starting the topic, again, I like to inform you on the general proceeding. If you have any questions or if you have any comments, you can come through the chat box. Then through the chat box, you can ask the questions from me. Then at time to time, I will able to answer those questions. Is it okay? Then I'll move to today's topic, the corporate governance. This corporate governance is one of the evolving topic, and there are several theories and literature available about the corporate governance. However, in Sri Lanka, we have two corporate governance rules or regulations. One is released by ICSL, that means Chartered Institution, as well as Securities and Exchange Commission. They have jointly released that corporate governance code, and other direction have been issued by Central Bank of Sri Lanka, which is applicable for the licensed banks. So having the two corporate governance, and the first one, corporate governance, I just wanted to mention before entering to the detailed discussion on the corporate governance. This is, you can get it, download these things from the internet and read it. That will give more idea and understanding about the corporate governance. The first corporate governance issued by Securities and Exchange Commission, as well as the Chartered Institution, which is applicable for all the listed companies, and the central bank one is applicable for the licensed bank in Sri Lanka. So those are the two best practices announced or released by the two regulatory authorities, Central Bank of Sri Lanka and Securities and Exchange Commission. So you can read the both to have a better understanding. That is the additional reading material you can have to get the knowledge about the corporate governance. Okay, having that, the first one is in the slides. You can see that the first one is corporate governance is the structure of rules, practices, and processes used to direct and manage a company. Okay, we will start with the questions. I'm asking, compared to the entrepreneurship or compared to a partnership, these companies are having corporate governance rules and regulations. Why? Particularly the companies are given, or it is expected that the companies has to run based on the best corporate governance practices. Why we are, or why the stakeholders are expecting the corporate governance should be followed by the companies rather than expect from an entrepreneur or a partnership. Why they expect the companies has to follow the corporate governance? Can anybody comment about it? Why the industry expect the companies to follow the corporate governance, particularly the companies listed in the stock exchange, or particularly the companies who are doing the financial business? It may be licensed banks or licensed finance companies. Why we expect those companies to have the corporate governance, or they have to follow those companies has to follow corporate governance? Why we are having such an expectation? Can anybody comment? Yes, there's a one person comment about it. It is generally the corporate governance are why we expect the companies to follow the corporate governance is they are deal with some others' money. We can simply say this in a different way. If it is an entrepreneurship or small shop or a small company, family, not small entrepreneur shop, or a partnership, small partnership, we are taking that example. In that small shop or small partnership, entrepreneurship, small shop or small partnership, where the owners themselves running the business. The owners themselves get involved the day-to-day management of the businesses. But in a company, particularly the listed in a listed company, the owners are different from management people. I think you may understand the situation. In a company, the shareholders are different from the board of directors, which is the body who is managing the operation of the particular company. So there's a clear distinction between the management and ownership. So therefore, there's a set of rules are described to the management, that means the board of directors. Okay, these are the rules and best practices and process which you have to follow in your management of the particular company or particular institution. That is the reason this corporate governance is introduced to the company, particularly introduced to the company structure. If you consider the list of listed company, in a listed company, the major shareholders may be different from the board of directors. There may be several shareholders. Everybody will not get involved in the management of the particular company. For example, if you take the JKH, one of the listed company, or Haley's, one of the listed company, there may be several thousands of shareholders. Everybody will not get involved the management of the particular company, the particular listed company. So what will happen is there may be the board of directors where the 10 people or 11 people or 15 people will be in the board of directors, and in the board of directors are totally different from the board of directors are functioning on behalf of the owners. So in that scenario, it is expected that the particular board of directors has to follow good practices, good rules, good practices, and good process in their management of that particular company. I can give some other example, which is sort of more than the normal listed company. For example, you can take a bank, for example, commercial bank. or HNB or Sambat Bank, where the owners, there may be, as a listed company, there may be several shareholders for the particular bank, and it is not possible every shareholders get involved in the day-to-day operation of the particular bank. So there will be a board of directors. So the board of directors has to look after the betterment of the shareholders. That is one thing. So we need to have the rules and best rules and practices and process for the particular the governance structure of the particular bank. Okay. On top of that, in a bank, the board of directors has to look after the interest of the depositors as well. Because in a bank, the depositors' fund are more than the capital funds. Maybe it's 5 times, 10 times more than their capital fund. So in that scenarios, the depositors' interest has to be looked after by this board of directors while they are look after the owners best betterment or best owners of the best of the owners. So in that scenario, the board of directors has to balance the interest between the shareholders and depositors. Likewise, in a company or in a financial institution, there may be different stakeholders. One is, as usual, shareholders is one of the stakeholder. And if it is a finance company or financial institution, the depositors may become one of the stakeholder, and lenders may become one of the stakeholder, and the regulator may become one of the stakeholder, and borrowers become one of the stakeholders, and again the government, the tax authorities, government will become one of the stakeholders. There may be several stakeholders get involved in a existence of the company or the company's functions. In that scenario, this particular corporate governance involves balancing the interest of a company's many stakeholders. The slides I have mentioned in the second bullet point, you can see that. The corporate governance involves the balancing the interest of a company's many stakeholders. That's you must keep in mind. Why this corporate governance is introduced? Because corporate governance is structure. What is corporate governance? It is a structure of rules, practices, and process used to direct and manage a company. Why it is given to the company particularly listed companies and banks? Because where owners are different from the managing people, the board of directors. So the board of directors, there's a set of rules and practices are given to the board of directors. Then it is saying that the corporate governance involves balancing the interest of a company's many stakeholders. There may be, as I mentioned, there may be several stakeholders. They have to keep the balance of interest of every stakeholders. They can't run the bank or businesses biased to shareholders or biased to depositors or biased to lenders or biased to borrowers. They have to keep the balancing, and they have to make sure the balancing thing. So that's why second bullet say that corporate governance involves balancing the interest of a company's many stakeholders. Then again, the third one is mentioning that a company's board of directors is the primary force influencing the corporate governance. The corporate governance is it only applicable to the board of directors? No, not at all. the best of the set of best rules and regulations and rules, practices and process are applicable to not only the board of directors, it is applicable to the top management. Even every employees, it is expected that they have to follow the best rules and practices. But the ultimate responsibility of the good corporate governance is lie on the board of directors, the company's board of directors. They are the people have the responsibility to implement a good corporate governance practice in the particular bank. You may remember that in the initial we have studied even the risk. When we are studying the risk management, you would have recalled that we say that, okay, risk management is sort of functions. Everybody is expected to do comply with the risk management best practices. But the board of directors having the ultimate responsibility to implement the risk management function. Likewise, here also the board of directors is the primary force of, they are the people who influencing the corporate governance in a company to follow the corporate governance best practices. And if you see the next point, it has mentioned that the bad corporate governance can cast doubt on the company's reliability, integrity, and transparency, which is most important for a company. For example, company X, we assume company X, which is listed in the Colombo Stock Exchange. So, but in the papers and in the press and internet and everywhere, there are news coming on about the bad practices, corporate governance practices of that particular company. For example, there is no proper board of directors in that particular company. Or the board of directors, the chairman, actually chairman should not get involved day-to-day operation. But there are news, gossips are coming like that. The chairman highly involved in the day-to-day operation, and he divert the company funds into his own companies, and there are some frauds and everything. The bad news are coming. What will happen? That may affect the reliability, integrity, and transparency of the particular company. That for example, we can say that will affect that will create a risk to the particular company. Reputational risk, that will create a reputational risk to the particular company. And if there's a bad corporate governance, that may create a lot of reputational risk to the company. If it is create reputational risk, that will affect the company in the financially as well as reputationally. So, for example, if it is a particularly for a bank and financial institution, if there is a bad corporate governance practices happening in the banks or finance companies, that will lose that will expose to the high reputational risk that particular banks or finance companies, if they have the bad corporate governance practices. For example, they don't disclose their profits, they don't disclose their risk management functions, even they don't publish their annual reports, and they don't follow the set of rules and best rules and practices. They have to have independent directors and all. They don't follow those things. They may, in this scenario, the particular banks or finance company may expose to several risks. First one is regulatory risk. If they don't follow the set of rules and regulations, then that company or that bank may expose to several risks. Particularly, the regulators will take strict action on those banks and finance companies. And if the news are if the news are leaked from the company about the company's bad practices to the press and media, then they may lose the deposits. That will create a severe consequences to the particular banks and finance companies. So the bad corporate governance can have implication on its financial health. Actually, in our country, this finance companies sector facing a severe problems these days. You may, as a financial student, as a banking student, you may aware that one of the reason for the failure of the particular sector is, one of the main reason is the bad corporate governance. If the corporate governance are best, then that sector would have been better than that is now. So bad corporate governance can have implication on its financial health. Any other questions? So that is all about the overview of the corporate governance. Anything you all wanted to ask from me about this? Actually, this is one of the topic which you can make it as an interest, or you can make it as a boring topic, because this is mostly about theoretical parts. So you have to keep it in mind and keep it memorize it, and just in the exam to answer the to answer the question paper. And what you can do is, you can keep the concept of this corporate governance. That will help you to answer the questions in the exam paper. Since you all don't have the questions, I will move to the second one. It is about the definition for corporate governance. The earlier slides, we have looked into the looking about what is corporate governance, sort of overview, why the corporate governance is important, why it is recorded for a company, and what will happen if there's a bad corporate governance and all. We have sort of overview. Now we are going to the definition of the corporate governance. If there is a question that what is corporate governance, you may have to write one of the definitions. There is no any the commonly accepted definitions, or one definition for the corporate governance. There are number of definitions released by number of institutions and number of regulatory bodies. This is some of the internationally recognized definitions. First one is about the OECD principle for corporate governance, which website mentioning that giving the definition that corporate governance involves a set of relationship between a company's management, its board, its shareholders, and other stakeholders. Okay, that is what we have seen in the first slide, which is covered in this definition. The corporate governance involves a set of relationship between a company's management, its board, its shareholders, and other stakeholders. So they have to keep the balance between these people. And it is giving sort of set of rules and practices on the relationship between these people, board of directors, shareholders, and other stakeholders. And the second sentence of the definition saying that corporate governance also provides the structure through which the objective of the company are set and the means of attaining those objects and monitoring performance are determined. So there are two things mentioned in this definition. First one is The corporate governance involves a set of relationship between this board of directors and shareholders and other stakeholders. That is the first message. And in the second message, it is given that the corporate governance also provide a structure which objective of the company. That means the objective of the companies, how the objective of the companies are achieved and how it been monitoring to facilitate that this corporate governance structure is an important thing. So this is OECD principle of corporate governance. The second one is the purpose of corporate governance is to facilitate effective, entrepreneurial and prudent management that can deliver the long-term success of the company. That is the UK Campaign Code 2010. The third one is corporate governance is about promoting corporate fairness, transparency and accountability. This is Economist Intelligence Unit Limited, which give sort of internationally accepted definition. Corporate governance is about promoting corporate fairness, transparency and accountability. Actually, if you see the corporate governance set of literatures, the most of the literature emphasizing that the corporate governance should have fairness. They should keep the balancing sort of balancing act between the different stakeholders. And then the next one is they are imposing, or they emphasize that the transparency is an important of the corporate governance. Transparency is much important in to run a company. And accountability. Each and every object, there should be a person, he should or who should take the accountability. It may be board of directors, it may be senior management, but the corporate governance promoting the corporate fairness, transparency and accountability. So these are some of the definitions you can go through, and these definitions will give some of the very brief way how to define the corporate governance. In the exams you can answer one of these definition if there's a question that what is corporate governance. One of the definition you can give. Any questions you wanted to ask from me? Yeah, there's a question here. If a company does not follow the practice or corporate governance, what are the regulatory risks? Any impact to the license, or this impact only within the company? It's a good question actually. For example, if a company, for example, we are taking a company, we are taking a finance institution or finance company. Then with regard to the finance company, there's a best corporate governance principles are available. And there are set of best corporate governance practices are given in that directions issued by the Central Bank of Sri Lanka. For example, for my easiness, I am taking this as a licensed bank. The licensed banks, Bank Supervision Department of the Central Bank, there are set of practices. The one is a director's maximum age should be 70. That is one of the regulations, one of the directions, one of the best practices proposed by the Central Bank. And they are saying that the second one, they are saying that okay, there should be 2 different people for the chairman and managing director. It means one person cannot be the chairman as well as managing director of the company. That is the second set of rule. Because we will study that in the management, the chairman is expected like a non-executive person. He should not get involved day-to-day function of the bank. But if it is a managing director, the managing director should get involved the day-to-day function of the bank. He may be CEO. So, in the central bank issued corporate governance direction, it is mentioned that there cannot be one person cannot be placed to the chairman as well as managing director post. There should be two people. That is one of the other requirements. And there are several other things. Actually, there are several other requirements we will see in the today's class or sometimes next class. The independent director, there should be some independent directors, the combination of executive directors and non-executive directions and all. So what will happen is, if the banks does not comply with the particular rules of the corporate governance direction issued by the central bank will impose some restriction to the bank. They may issue the warning to the bank, okay, look, one of your directors' age exceeded 70. So you can't continue with this board of directors. You have to remove that particular director from the board of directors. If a bank, they appoint the chairman and managing director, appoint the one person as a chairman as well as managing director, then the central bank will say, look, you can't appoint like this. You have to remove, or you have to remove this one person from the both post. You have to appoint two separate people to the chairman as well as managing director post. Otherwise, we will then they will take some regulatory action on these banks. But as you mentioned, these non-compliance will not lead to cancellation of license, because cancellation of license is sort of the last options. But for these the non-compliance of best practices, so corporate governance best practices, what they will do is they will impose some small restriction to the companies and particular banks, and they will give some deadlines to the banks. Okay, you have to comply with these corporate governance best practices before this date. In some cases, for the extreme cases, they may say, okay, if you cannot comply with this restriction, you can't. Let's say they can say that you can't raise the deposits anymore, because you have to comply with these rules and regulations. Likewise, there are the regulatory restriction to that particular violations or non-compliances. So these type of actions will be called as the risk to the regulatory risk. The regulator, any non-compliance of the regulatory requirement will create a regulatory risk to the particular banks and finance companies. I think you may understand the answer for these questions. If you want any further clarification, please, anybody can feel free to come to the inbox and you can ask any questions. I am ready to answer, provided that if I know the answers. Otherwise, what we'll do is I will ready for it and come into the next class. Okay, there's a feedback. I understood and thank you. Welcome always. And if you don't have any other questions, we will go to the third slides, which is about the benefit of corporate governance. First, we have seen some overview, what is corporate governance, and some background information about the corporate governance. And second, we have seen some definitions which will help you to understand about the corporate governance, as well as in the examination point of view, that will help you to give the answer if they ask what is corporate governance. You can use one of the definition and you can answer. The third question is about benefit of corporate, third slide is to discuss about benefit of corporate governance. There may be several benefits for following these corporate governance best practices. First one is ensures corporate success and economic growth. Because why these regulators are putting some set of rules and regulations for the banks or particular listed companies? Because when they are following best rules and practices, then that will lead to the company for a corporate success. They can success in their businesses. They can grow economically. For example, if a company, they have a good corporate governance practices, they are having well transparent mechanism in that company and integrity and everything, that will create a good reputation to that company. If they have the good reputation, what they can do is they can easily raise their capital in their in the capital market. If there's a good company which follow all the good corporate governance set of rules and regulations, then what they can do is they can easily, for example, if they go for a debenture issue, those debentures will be easily subscribed, and we can say that they can borrow at a lower cost. And if a company which have following all the corporate governance, they can approach the bank and they can borrow at a lower rate. So for the corporate success and economic growth, this best corporate governance is one of the factors. The second one is maintain investor confidence and lowers of the capital cost, which I think I have explained to you already. If a bank or finance companies or any listed companies, any companies which are having good corporate governance practices in their company activities, and they can maintain a investor confidence. They are publishing good annual reports and everything. And as I mentioned already, they can borrow at a lower cost if they have the good corporate governance practices. That is the second benefit of the corporate governance, good corporate governance or following corporate governance. And third one is create positive impact on share price. This is the third one. Because I have already mentioned that the listed companies has to follow good corporate governance practices. If those companies following the good corporate governance practices, that will create a good reputation to that company, and that good reputation will create a positive impact to the share prices. For example, we can take there's a X company and Y company. X company is good, they are following good corporate governance, and they are publishing all their financial information to the public, and it is readily available, and they have good reputation in the market. And one other company, which is Y company, even though they have listed, they don't follow the corporate governance. There's no good reputation to that particular company, and they don't publish the annual reports. Obviously, which company will have good share prices? Company X, because they are following good corporate governance practices and having the good reputation. So that's why it says that create good impact on share prices. And the next one is provides proper inducement to the owners as well as managers to achieve their objective. Actually, that's what in one of the definition we have seen, that the corporate governance will facilitate the stakeholders to achieve the objective of the company. That is the ultimate. So these corporate governance best practices will provide to the managers as owners to achieve their objectives. And the next one is minimize wastage, corruption, risk, and mismanagement. Because if there is a good corporate governance and there's a good combination of executive directors, non-executive directors, and independent directors, they are following good set of rules and regulations and best practices, industry practices, then that will facilitate to reduce the wastage or corruption as well as risk and mismanagement. So that is also be considered as one of the benefit. And other one is help in brand formation and development. If there is a good corporate governance, that will facilitate to create good reputation. And that good reputation will facilitate to create good brand name, the branding. And it will facilitate to develop the particular brand of the company. If you wanted to invest in a shares, even though it's a good or bad, you may have some popular names. You may always prefer to invest. Why? Because of the brand name. And in the brand name, it create a good imagination of in your mind. So that good reputation will create a good brand name, and that is why it is created. Basically, the following good corporate governance facilitate to create a brand information and development, brand formation and development. Then finally, the final benefit we can say, ensure the organization manage in a manner that fit the best interest of all. That's why I have already mentioned. When a board of directors manage the particular company, they have to manage the company in the best interest of all the stakeholders. They should not only bias to the shareholders. They should not only bias to the depositors. They should not only bias to the regulators. What they have to do is, they have to manage the company in the best interest of all the stakeholders. That is the main concept of this corporate governance. The main concept is the corporate governance is a set of rules and regulations and process to manage the company in the best interest of all the stakeholders. So that is also one of the benefit you can get it from the best corporate governance practices. Any questions you wanted to ask from me? Okay. Now I am developing this topic in a way to understand easily. The first I have discussed about some overview of the corporate governance, why it is applicable to a company compared to the partnership or entrepreneurship, and then the sort of background information. Then I just move into the definition, what is corporate governance, and the best accepted definition by internationally. So the second one, and then third, I have discussed right now these benefits of corporate governance. Now we are going somewhat deep into the corporate governance topic. As I mentioned, different regulators issue different corporate governance practice, set of rules and regulations to the companies. There are two types of approach in the corporate governance. One is rule-based approach, other one is principle-based approach. What is the difference between the rule-based approach and principle-based approach? This is rule-based approach and principle-based approach. Normally, if you see these the banking regulations or finance company regulations, there can be two type of regulations or two type of regulations can be issued by regulators. One is rule-based regulations, other one is principle-based regulations. What is the difference between these two? Generally, the US issued the directions and guidelines based on the rule-based. If this scenario, you have to follow this. If this scenario, you have to follow this. Some rules. Each and everything will be ruled out and each and everything will be described as a rules. Okay, these are the circumstances you have to follow. These are the things, which is called a rule-based approach. But the principle-based approach is they are giving, okay, they don't give the particular rules. What they will do is they will give sort of principles. Okay, for example, what I can say is an example. I can take an example. Okay, the composition of board of directors. The rule-based approach will say, if it is the board of directors of a bank or finance company, the rule-based approach will say, you may keep the board of directors between 9 to 13. You can keep the number of board of directors between 9 to 18, out of which 1/3 should be independent directors. 1/3 should be non-executive directors. 1/3 should be the executive directors, which is rule-based. They are just clearly saying that you can keep maximum 9 to 13. You can keep the board of directors between 9 to 13. In the 9 to 12 or something. And if it is 9 to 12 and if it is the composition, what you have to do is now 1/3 of the board of directors should be independent directors. 1/3 of the directors should be non-executive directors, and other 1/3 should be executive directors. This is the rule base. Okay, each and everything they have explained particularly precisely. But in the principle-based approach, what they will say is, okay, you have to keep right composition in your board of directors. They may not say, okay, 1/3 should be in this way, 1/3 should be in this way, or half of the directors should be non-executive, half should be executive. They will not define the rules. They will say that, okay, you have to keep the proper composition in the board of directors. And other thing is sometimes in the principle base, you can have some leeway as well. They will say, okay, if it is a chairman and MD, the managing director, it is better to have two different people for the chairman and managing director. They may not impose, but they may say that it is always better to keep two different people for the chairman and managing director post. That is principle based. But rule based say that you must keep two different people, but you can't deviate from that. But in the principle base, what will happen is they will say it is better to keep two different people, but if they don't comply with the proper reasoning, you can deviate from the particular rule if it is in the principle based approach to the corporate governance. But if it is a rule based, it is you have to follow. So we can see the slides now. It is based on the view that companies must be required by law or some other form of compulsory regulation to comply with established principles of good corporate governance practice. This is a rule based on some laws and some regulations, some compulsory laws. It is said that you have to comply with these good principles of corporate governance. That is the rule-based approach. The advantages, companies don't have the choice of ignoring the rules. That is an advantage. If it is every company, they say that okay, you can have maximum 9 board of directors. They can only have the 9 board of directors. They can't ignoring the rules. That is one of the advantage. They are saying that companies don't have the choice of ignoring the rules. So everybody has to follow, because it is basically based on the laws or some directions or compulsory regulations. The second one is all companies are required to meet the same minimum standards. The rule base, okay, if it is a there can't be a director whose age is more than 70. There can't be an over 70 age of the person as a director. If it is, all banks has to follow those things. All companies are required to meet same minimum standards. Investor confidence in the stock market might be improved. These are the advantage they are giving for the rule-based approach. What are the disadvantages? The same rules might not be suitable for every company. Because, for example, if it is a listed bank or bank licensed banks, we are saying that we are saying sort of regulations in the bank. Okay, you can impose some directions to the bank related to the corporate governance. Okay, you must have different separate risk management unit within your bank, or integrated risk management unit within your bank. He is highly qualified person, and likewise we are giving some directions to the particular bank. So the board of directors should have some subcommittee. There should be 2 people from the board of directors in that subcommittee. So risk and that committee is called as a risk management committee. Under the risk management committee, there should be a integrated risk management policy and all, and the system framework should be in place in the bank. If it is the large bank, it is easy to them to implement those requirements. But if it is a small bank, it may be difficult for them to implement that things. For example, if it is a very small bank, then that rules may not applicable to them, or for them it's very difficult. So that's why it says that one of the disadvantage for the rule-based corporate approach to corporate governance is the same rules might not be suitable for every company. I can say, which is not related to the corporate governance. One of the direction I can say why to explain this condition, I can bring to one example. We are central bank imposing a direction. A bank, licensed commercial bank should have a minimum capital of 20 billion. That is one of the direction issued by the central bank. If it is a large bank, for them it is easy to mobilize the 20 billion as a minimum capital. But if it is a small bank, it is very difficult to maintain that 20 billion as a minimum capital. So the same rule might not be suitable for every company. That is the idea behind this. The second one is, there are some aspects of the corporate governance that cannot be regulated easily. So that is That is also one of the disadvantage in the rule-based approach to the corporate governance. So far, we have seen the rule-based approach, and the second one is principle-based approach to the corporate governance. Do you all have any questions on the rule-based approach? The principle-based approach to corporate governance mentioning that it is based on the view that a single set of rules is inappropriate for every company. Therefore, corporate governance code should consist with principles, not rules. That is a principle-based approach. So they say that, okay, there should be minimum of 9 directors in a board of directors. That is a rule base. But they say that if it is a single set of rules, will not be inappropriate to every company. So they are saying that, okay, you must have adequate number of directors, the principles, to take a best decision on the corporate governance or best decision on the company management. So that is the principle base. But in the rule base, they precisely mention the number of directors. But in the principle base, they say that you have enough number of directors in your board of directors to take the best practices with related to the company management or company day-to-day operations. So now you may understand what is the difference between the principle base and rule base, and we have already discussed about the rule base, and now the principle base. It says that a single set of rules is inappropriate for every company. Therefore, corporate governance code should consist principles, not rules. The principles should be applied to all companies. So they say that under these rules, there is no particular rules, but they say that, okay, principles should be applied to all companies. And guidelines should be issued with a code to suggest how the principles should be applied in practices. So it says that, okay, rather than following the set of rules, the guidelines should be issued with a code to suggest how the principle should be applied. So first they will release some principle, and then there may be the guidelines how these principles could be followed. And then the third one is, as general rules, companies should be expected to comply with guidelines. When a company does not comply with the guideline, it should report to the fact that shareholders and explain it reason for non-compliance. Here, it is the main difference between the rule base and principle base. In the rule base, it must be followed. If there is a rule which must be followed by every company, that is the rule based approach. But in the principle base, it says that when a company does not comply with the guideline, it should report this fact to the shareholders and explain its reason for the non-compliance. That's all. I can give another example to further understanding about the rule base and principle base. In the rule base, it says that every quarter the board of directors should have the board meetings. Every quarter, the board of directors should have the board meeting. That one of the rule-based approach to corporate governance. This is one of the direct governance. But in the principle-based approach, may say that the board of directors may have the board meeting at a frequent to discuss, to enable the board to discuss the business matters. So in the rule base, actually, they must have the 4 meetings every quarter. But in the principle base, okay, they must have the meetings. But if they cannot they cannot have more meetings, they can give the give sort of explanation in the annual report or explanation to the stakeholders and just deviate from the particular requirement. So that is the difference between the rule base and principle. The last point is correctly mentioned. When a company does not comply with the guideline, it should report the fact that shareholders and explain to the reason for non-compliances. For example, a company having only one meeting at a particular year, they may can give a particular reason. Okay, due to the corona or due to some reason, we could not have the more meetings. We are having only one meeting. So that is the benefit or that is one of the features of the principle-based approach. This approach is called as comply or explain approach. Either you comply or explain approach. That's why this principle-based approach is called as comply or explain approach. I think now you have you would have understand this rule-based approach and principle-based approach, because why I am taking more time to explain this approach, because there may be questions that the sword notes rule-based approach to corporate governance and principle-based approach to corporate governance. Just compare. Then you must be able to write both approaches. So that is one of the reasons why I'm giving this rule-based and I'm giving or taking more time to explain this rule-based and principle-based. I think you have you would have understand the concept. Do you have any questions? Okay. If you don't have any questions, I'll move to the next area. That is the code of best practices and corporate governance. I have already discussed this at the beginning of the discussion. In Sri Lanka, there are 2 regulatory bodies issued the best code of best practices on corporate governance. One is Securities and Exchange Commission, jointly with Institute of Chartered Accountants of Sri Lanka, in several occasions. They have first issued this in 1997 December, the Code of Best Practices and Corporate Governance for the listed companies or the companies which shares are listed in the Colombo Stock Exchange. And then they have go for a second edition in 2003 and third edition in 2008 and fourth edition in September 2013 and fifth one is December 2017, which is currently applicable best practices. If you type this SEC Code of Best Practices on Corporate Governance in the internet, you can get that entire document. Actually, that will give a more understanding about you about these on these corporate governance best practices in Sri Lanka. The second one is the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, CBSL, also issued a guideline on corporate governance for licensed bank in December 2007. This central bank guideline is applicable only for the licensed banks. But this SEC guideline is sort of more vast because which is applicable to all the listed companies. By the way, in Sri Lanka, how many listed companies are there? Roughly? How many listed companies are in Sri Lanka, in Colombo Stock Exchange? Any idea? Any volunteers? How many listed companies in Sri Lanka? Colombo Stock Exchange. Okay, it is nearly 300, 292, 300. It's time to time changing. You can take, this is less than nearly 300, the round figure, 292, 300. So the second guideline, central bank guideline, is applicable for only 32 banks, but this code of best practices issued by the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, is applicable for more than 300 companies. So the first one having more coverage. Okay, now I'm going to discuss on the best practices explained in the SEC1, the Securities and Exchange Commission use best practices, where they have mentioned something about the board of directors and board responsibility and board balance and independent director, chairman, executive officer, and chairman's roles, and appoint a board of director, appoint to a board. These are the things, these rules are based on the best practices issued by Securities and Exchange Commission. And actually in the next class, I will discuss some corporate governance practices issued by Central Bank of Sri Lanka, which is applicable for the licensed banks. And actually there is another corporate governance direction recently issued by the licensed finance companies, which is also issued by the another department of the central bank. But thing is, the licensed banks one is more stringent one. So it is better to study the licensed banks corporate governance. And so I will discuss that in the next class. So this class we can see that some best practices informed by the announced by prescribed by the best practices code of conduct, corporate governance rules or guideline issued by the Securities and Exchange Commission. The first one is about the board of directors. It has mentioned that every public company should be headed by effective board, which should direct, lead, and control the company. So it is mentioned in that, okay, every public company means which is listed in the Colombo Stock Exchange, which should be headed by effective board. This is sort of principle based. They don't prescribe. They are saying that it should be effective board should be lead the public company, and it should control the company. And second one is indirectly they say that there should be board of directors. The second one is board should meet regularly. So this is sort of principle based. But then again, they say that the board meeting should be held at least once in every quarter of the financial year. First, they are giving some principle. The board should meet regularly, but then they are giving some guidelines. The board meeting should be held at least once in every quarter of the financial year. And third one, they are saying that board collectively and directors individually must act in accordance with the laws of the country as applicable to the business enterprise. So they say that collectively and individually, the board of directors must act in accordance with the laws of the countries and applicable to the particular business, they must comply with all the laws of the country. And then they are saying that every director should dedicate adequate time and effort to matter of the board and company to ensure that duties and responsibilities owed to the company are satisfactorily discharged. These are some of the things they have mentioned about the board of directors. So when they are asking about it, you have to say that every public company must have a effective board. That is first requirement they have prescribed. And second one, they are saying that they must have the regular meeting in the financial year, and they say that it is at least once in a quarter. So at least 4 meetings they must have. Then they are saying the third one is board collectively and directors individually must, in accordance with the laws of the country as applicable to the business enterprise. And finally, they say that directors should dedicate adequate time and effort to the matter of the board and the company to ensure that the duties and responsibilities owed to the company are satisfactorily discharged. Because some of the directors are accepting directorship just sake of name. They don't contribute to the company. So the best practices are saying that every director must deliver their duties, ensure that their duties and responsibilities owed to the company are satisfactorily discharged. That must be. So that is one of the other regulations issued by this with regard to the board of directors. These 4 things I have mentioned in the board of this corporate governance guidelines issued by Securities and Exchange Commission. Any questions you all wanted to ask? In the particular guideline, the next they have mentioned some board of directors responsibilities. They have prescribed some responsibilities to the board of directors. The first one is ensuring the formulation and implementation of sound business strategies. That is one of the responsibility of the board. They set out some responsibilities to the board of directors. The first one is ensuring the formulation and implementation of a sound business strategy. The second one is, so the board of directors are responsible for formulate and implement the business strategy, right business strategies. And second one, they are saying that ensuring that the management team possess the skill, experience, and knowledge to implement that strategy. That is the second responsibility of the board. For example, there's a construction company. If there's a construction company, actually who has to be the board of directors? Or majority of the board of directors must have the civil engineering skill, civil engineering qualifications. They must have the skills and experience on the construction field. Then only they can implement the strategies. So they are saying that the board of directors should ensure that the management team possess the skill, experience, and knowledge to implement the strategy. That is the second responsibility of the board of directors. The third one is ensuring the adoption of the effective key management personnel succession strategy. Actually, in the most of the companies, they may run with the in a good manner, and the functions may be carried out by some key management personnel, but there cannot be, or there won't be, or there may not be succession strategy for that key management personnel. What do you mean by succession strategy? Anybody? Can you answer? What is the meaning of succession strategy? Come on, students. You have to answer just to get a feedback. Can anybody say that what is the succession strategy? Okay. There's a one answer: staff retirement and replacement plan. Exactly. For example, if a company, if a bank, there is a good DGM, he is in charge for the credit, or CEO, he is running the bank in a best way, but he is reaching to 70. He is reaching to 70. Then, as per the central bank regulations guideline, after 70, CEO cannot be the director of the bank, so he has to retire. So in that scenario, they have to have succession plan, continuation plan, business continuation, in the sense after that particular key person, who will replace that person. Recently, one of the bank, I saw in the newspaper, one of the bank announced that after 2 years, this person will become the CEO of the bank. They already announced succession plan. They have already announced the succession plan for that particular post. It's a good corporate governance practices. Then everybody knows that, okay, that person will become after 2 years, that person will become the CEO post of the particular bank. Then what will happen is he also can prepare himself to that, so that sort of the responsibility, and the particular bank CEO also, the existing CEO also, can teach them, can convey their experiences to the newcomer. So there's a succession strategy in that particular bank. You would have read it in the newspaper. One of the bank, they have announced a succession strategy for the CEO. So ensuring the adoption of an effective key management personnel succession strategy is one of the responsibility of the board of directors. The fourth one is ensuring effective system to secure integrity of information, internal controls, business continuity, and risk management is one of the prime responsibility of the board of directors. This is also set out in the corporate governance guideline issued by the Securities and Exchange Commission jointly with the Chartered Institute of Sri Lanka. So the board of directors should secure the integrity of the information, because companies, particularly banks and financial institutions, are getting the informations, customer informations and all. Secure the integrity of the information. Internal controls, because in the risk management we have studied that even though internal auditor is there, the ultimate responsibility of the risk management and internal control is lie with the board of directors. So they had to ensure that, okay, there's a proper internal control system in place in the bank or company. And business continuity. If there is a sudden disturbances, the bank or particular business should continue without any interruptions. So business continuity must be ensured by the board of directors. That is one of the responsibility of the board of directors. And as we already discussed, the risk management. The ultimate responsibility of the risk management is the responsibility of the board of directors. So, which is reiterated by this set of code of the best practice of corporate governance issued by the SEC. Finally, it says that ensuring compliance with the laws, regulation, ethical standards. It is also board's responsibility. So these are the responsibilities set out by the board. Okay, there are some more responsibilities. The next one is ensuring all stakeholders' interests are considered in corporate decisions. This is most important thing. Even the central bank guideline, it is mentioned. That means even in the board of directors, there may be 9 board of directors or 11 board of directors. But in practically, some of the board of directors are influencing the decision-making function of the particular banks or listed companies. Because even though there are 9 board of directors, 11 board of directors, some people dominate the decision-making. Or some independent directors or non-executive directors' voices are not listened by the boards. So they are saying that ensuring all stakeholders' interests are considered in corporate governance, and all the people has to ensure that one of the responsibility, the board of directors responsibility, the board of directors views and opinion has to be taken in the decision-making process. That is, which I have not mentioned here. That is also one of the board responsibility. And the next one is, we have already seen that there is the first one, ensuring all stakeholders' interests are considered in the corporate decisions. Because that is the prime responsibility of the purpose of the corporate governance. All the stakeholders' interests are considered in the corporate decision. Some decisions are maybe biased to the shareholders or lenders or borrowers or depositors. It should not be. Ensuring that when they are taking the decisions, it should consider all the stakeholders' interest. So the previous one you can mention. Actually that I have not mentioned here. The ensuring that all the directors' opinions and views are considered when formulating the decisions, when taking the decisions, which I have not mentioned in the direction. You can mention in your copy or in your notebook. And the third one, the other one is the recognizing suitable business development in corporate strategy, decision, and activities. So, this is also one of the responsibilities of the board of directors, recognizing the suitable business development in corporate strategy, decision, and activities. And one before the final, ensuring that companies' values and standards are set with emphasis on adapting corporate appropriate accounting policies and fostering compliance with financial regulations. So Again, adopting the appropriate accounting policies and compliance with the financial regulations are one of the responsibility of the board of directors. And finally, the board of one other responsibilities fulfilling the such other board functions are vital given the scale and nature of complexity of the business concern. So we can see these are some of the responsibilities, the board of directors responsibilities set out in the corporate governance guideline issued by the SEC. So these, if there is any questions in the exam paper, the board of directors responsibilities, you can write it down, these responsibilities. Ensuring and formulating implementation of sound business strategy. Ensure that management team possess skill, experience, and knowledge to implement the strategy. Ensuring the adoption of effective key management personnel succession strategy. And ensuring effective system to secure integrity of information, internal control, business continuity, and risk management. Ensuring compliance with laws, regulation, ethical standards. Ensuring all stakeholders' interests are considered in corporate decisions. Recognizing suitable business development in corporate strategy, decision, and activities. Ensuring that company values and standards are set out with emphasis on adoption appropriate accounting policies and fostering compliance with financial regulations, and fulfilling such other board functions are vital given the scale, nature, and complexity of the business concern. So these are the responsibilities set out by the guideline issued the Securities and Exchange Commission. So if there's any questions on board responsibility, you can list out these responsibilities based on the marks allocated to the question paper or particular questions. Because when I am correcting the exam paper, I actually I've noticed that not this subject, some other subject. I noticed that some people write one-page answer for 2 marks. What is the worth of that? When you are writing the answers in the exam, you must consider what is the marks given for the particular questions. If there is a 2 marks or 1 mark questions, you must give the answer very precisely and short. If there's a 5 marks question, of course you have to answer detailed manner. Or 10 marks question, you have to answer in a detailed manner. But if it's a 1 or 2 marks, so actually if it is a board responsibilities, if there's what are the board responsibilities and given 2 marks, you can write 1 or 2 board responsibility or 3 rows or board responsibility and stop this. But if it is a 5 marks, of course you have to write it in a detailed manner. So actually when you are answering at the questions, you have to answer appropriately, and you have to see what is how many marks given to these questions and answer based on that. Okay, you have to actually in the exam is some sort of techniques. You have to follow that techniques in the exam. Then only you can be the successful in that examinations. Understand? Okay, anything you all wanted to ask from me? Shall I move to other topic? This is about the board balance. We have discussed, or once I have mentioned that there should be a proper composition in the board of directors. This the proper composition means There may be executive directors, non-executive directors, and independent directors. When there's a decision-making functions, it should not correct that one individual or few individuals taking or dominating the decision of the banks or listed companies. All the people have to contribute for a decision-making process of the company. All the people means all the board of directors. And if you want to have a good decision-making process in the board must have different type of people. It may be executive, it may be non-executive directors or independent directors. The first one, it says that board to have a balance of executive and non-executive directors such that no individual or small group of individuals can dominate the board's decision making. What it is mean? Okay, before going there, what is the meaning of executive directors and non-executive directors? Any volunteers? What is the meaning of executive director? Or do you all know that what is the difference between the executive directors and non-executive directors? Can anybody? Just to get the feedback. Who is called as a executive directors? Who is called as a non-executive directors? Can anybody give the answer? Because to understand this point, you must know that what is executive director and who is executive director and who is non-executive director. If you have that understanding only, you can understand about this first point. Okay. The executive directors means the director who is involving the day-to-day operation of the bank or listed company is called as an executive director. So executive director means the director who is involving the day-to-day operation of the bank or listed company is called as a executive director. For example, CEO of the company. CEO of the company generally be the director of the particular company. He can be the CEO. He is also one of the board member. But the CEO is getting involved with the day-to-day business decision making or day-to-day business operation. So the particular CEO is considered as an executive director. Sometimes DGM of the company, Deputy General Manager. He may be the director of the particular he may be represent the board directors, or he may be one of the board directors. And in that case, the particular DGM will become, or particular director will become executive director. So the simple definition is the executive director means a director who is involving day-to-day business of the company. Then the non-executive director is just opposite to the executive director. That means a director who is not involving day-to-day operation of the business is called as non-executive directors. Generally, chairman of the board should be non-executive director. He may not be the employee of the company. He may not get involved day-to-day operation of the company. He is the person outside person, he will become the director of the company and he may not get involved day-to-day operation of the particular company or listed company or bank. He is the non-executive director. The chairman should be a non-executive director. There may be several other directors. They may also non-executive directors because they may not get involved day-to-day operation of the bank or finance companies or listed companies or companies. So it says that board to have a balance of executive and non-executive directors such that no individual or small group of individuals can dominate the board decision making. It is an important thing. Because if we assume that in the board, only executive directors are representing the board, we assume. That means the senior officers of the company become the director of the board. Everybody get involved the day-to-day operation of the company, and they are the board members. What will happen when there's a decision making with regard to the huge losses of the company? The board of directors may try to cover themselves. The decision making will be biased. Or they may only think about their business activities, their involvement. There may not be any independent opinion or any common view. So that's it. They are saying that the board of directors should have combination of executive and non-executive directors and avoid an individual or small group will dominate the board. In other way around, I can explain you. There's a company. Only executive directors are representing the board of directors, or appointed as a board of directors. Only executive director. It means the high management personnel are appointed as a board of directors. What will happen? The CEO may be dominate the decision making of the company. Why? Because CEO is the ultimate. CEO is the highest rank post in the particular company. So if it is the only executive directors in the board, what will happen is when CEO saying something, other junior officers may not. Other senior management, maybe DGM or AGM or others, may not oppose to the or may not say any opinion against the CEO's opinion. So the decision may be dominated by the CEO of the company. So that is the reason that it says that the board to have a balance of executive and non-executive directors such that no individual or small group of individuals can dominate the board decision making. The second one is the board should include at least 2 non-executive directors or such number of non-executive directors equivalent to 1/3 of total number of directors, whichever higher. It's sort of tricky. It says that the board should include at least 2 non-executive directors or 1/3 of or such number of non-executive director equivalent to 1/3 of total directors, whichever higher. So then in any board, if it is one, we have to calculate 1/3 of the board directors and at least 2, whichever higher, should be at least the non-executive directors. You will understand this. For example, if the board of members is only 5 people, then at least two people should be board of directors. At least 2 people should be non-executive directors. Let's assume that board of directors is a 9. In that case, 1/3 of the board of directors is 3. At least 2, whichever higher than 3 must be non-executive directors. So the board should include at least 2 non-executive directors or 1/3 of the total number of directors, whichever is higher. I think you would have understood it. Then the next one is where the constitution of the board of directors includes only 2 non-executive directors, both should be non-executive directors should be independent directors. Here, there is a other word called independent director. So now we are studying 3 types of directors. One is executive directors, other one is non-executive directors, third one is independent director. Now we have already studied who is executive directors, who is non-executive directors. Now there's other questions coming that who is independent director, because it says that where the constitution of the board of directors includes only 2 non-executive directors, both such non-executive directors should be independent. In all other instances, 2 or 1/3 of the non-executive director appointed to the board of directors, whichever higher, should be independent director. Now, there's a question that who is independent director? Okay, there's a definition. A director would not be considered they say that, okay, a director would not be independent if he or she as employed by the company, subsidiary or parent of the company during the period. Here, they are defining the independent director in the negative way. What they are doing is, if one director has particular requirement or particular particular director fit into the certain criteria, he cannot be considered as an independent director. So others can be considered as an independent director. That is the negative way it has been explained. So it says that if any director, if he has been employed by the company, if he is an employer of the particular company or its subsidiary or if the parent company during the last 2 years period, then he cannot be independent director. So in that scenario, you can understand that if we call as one director as an independent director, he should not be the employee of that particular company or subsidiary or parent company during the last 2 years. Understand? The second one is currently has or has had within last 2 years immediately preceding appointment as director or material business relationship with the company. It means if a director who has a material business relationship with the company within the last 2 years period or currently, then he cannot be considered as an independent director. What it is meaning? For example, if a company X, in that company, the A will be has the major supply of this company X. Then he has a material business relationship with that company. So he cannot be, and if the Mr. A is appointed to the company, then he cannot be considered as an independent director because he has the material interest with the company. Third one is, as a close family member of the director or executive director or key management personnel, then he cannot be the independent director. For example, if the CEO spouse is appointed as a director, he or she cannot consider it as an independent director because he is the close relationship of the existing director or chief executive officer. The fourth one is has served on the board of the company continuously for a period exceeding 9 years from the date of first appointment, then he cannot be the independent director. And a significant shareholder of the company or officer or otherwise associate with directly with a significant shareholder, then he cannot be independent director. So they are giving some criteria. If a director fit into that particular criteria, then he cannot be considered as an independent director. So if we have to keep in the mind in this direction. So there may be questions. I think in past paper also we understand we saw some questions. The independent director. Who is independent director? Generally, the independent director are the director who is a non-executive director. That means who should not get involved in the day-to-day operation of the company, and he should not be the employee of the company, of the particular company or subsidiary or parent company during last 2 years period, and he should not have the material relationship with the company, and he should not be the close family member of the director. He should executive director, key management personnel, and he should if he should not serve as a director of the company for no more than 9 years period, and he should not have the significant shareholding in the particular company. Then only he can be considered as an independent director. Have you all understand it? Have you understand it? The independent director. Have you any doubt on this independent director? Because there may be questions on this independent director. Okay. If you have understanding, then I'll move to the chairman and chairman and chief executive officer. These I have already mentioned. There are two differences in chairman and executive officer. There are two key tasks to the top of every public company: conducting the business of the board and facilitating executive responsibility for the management of the company's business. Actually, in every company, there are two positions. One is conducting the board functions. Then that is led by the chairman. Other one is conducting the facilitating executive responsibility of the management of the business, the management of the company's business, that is normally carried out by the chief executive officer. There should be a clear division of responsibilities at the head of the company, which will ensure the balance of power and authority. A decision to combine the post of chairman and CEO in one person should be justified and highlighted annual report. Actually, in the central bank directions, a person cannot be a chairman as well as CEO in a licensed bank. But based on this Securities and Exchange guideline, actually it is better to keep two different people. But if one person appointed as a chairman as well as CEO, the proper justification has to be given in the annual report. That is, you must understand here. And the chairman's role, it's nothing to explain much. The chairman's role in preserving good corporate governance is crucial. As a person responsible for running the board, the chairman should preserve order and facilitate the effective discharge of the board functions. And then there are some directions are given. They ensure that effective participation of both executive, non-executive directors, and encourage all the directors to make an effective contribution for the benefit of the company and maintain a balance of power between executive and non-executive. Actually, the chairman's role is keeping a balance within the board. He must ensure that board of these executive and non-executive directors are participating in the board in effective manner and encourage all directors to make effective contribution to the benefit of the company and maintaining the balance of power between the executive and non-executive. Because if you see some companies, non-executive directors are executive directors are highly influenced in the decision making because they know the skills, they know the day-to-day operation of the bank. Sometimes they started to control the company, but actually there should be the contribution from the non-executive directors as well. This balance has to be maintained, and this is about the appointment to the board. There should be a formal and transparent procedure for appointment of the new board of directors. These all things are we list out in the corporate governance direction of the guideline of the SEC. And the second one is a nomination committee should be established to make the recommendation to vote on all new board appointment. Board as a whole should annually assess board composition to ascertain whether the combined knowledge and experience of the board matches the strategic demand facing the company. And upon the appointment of the new director to the board, the company should forthwith disclose it to shareholders. All directors should be required to submit themselves for re-election and at regular intervals and at least once in 3 years. So appointment of directors, there are several things has been listed out. Basically, there should be a formal and transparent procedure for appointment of new directors. And they said that there should be a nomination committee to appoint, to identify and appoint, recommend the new board of directors. And annually, the board as a whole should annually broad-based composition and ascertain whether these combined knowledges, experience are matched to the strategy of demand for the company. And once they appoint a new director, it has to be informed to the shareholders, and all directors should be submit themselves re-election at least once in 3 years. So these are some of the set principles for the good corporate governance in a company. For example, this why this corporate governance is important here. For example, if you can see that if it is every 3 years, if a director appointed, he should be subject to re-election in a frequent interval. Otherwise, what will happen? He may start to dominate the company. If there is no re-election, he may start to dominate the company. Sometimes shareholders' interest will not be safeguarded by that director. So, every 3 years in the annual general meeting, he must be subject to the re-elections. So if the shareholders doesn't like that particular director, they can change the director. There should be an opportunity. That is one of the best practice in the corporate governance. So having that, actually, this is the time to wind up. So today we have discussed something about the overview of the corporate governance and definition and benefits. Then we have seen rule-based corporate governance and policy-based, principle-based corporate governance. And then we have discussed about these two corporate governance best practices issued by the SEC as well as CBSL. And then we have seen some SEC-related things, the board of directors and their responsibilities, and the balance board, as well as independent directors. And then who is independent directors? Actually, this is one of the areas you have to keep in mind. And chairman and executive officer details, and chairman's roles, and finally appointments to the board. So these are the things we have discussed, and most important parts will be discussed at the next class. which is about the corporate governance guideline issued by the central banks. So I think I'm going to close this, wind up this class today for today's class with this moment. And if you don't have any questions, we can stop this class. We will meet next class. Okay, thank you.